Yeah, welcome everybody. I'm Austin. I'm a product manager at Zapier. I have worked in automation for a while, and I'm very focused on enterprise AI and using AI and stuff like that. And AMC, do you want to do a little intro before I talk about our session?
Totally. I'm AMC or Anna Marie. I'm director of product here at Zapier, excuse me, focused on agents and AI. Spent a lot of time doing kind of B2B collaboration SaaS in my career, Asana, Yammer, brief stint in the crypto world at Coinbase. And yeah, I'm super, super, super excited to talk about PM agents.
Awesome. So the way we're going to go through this today is AMC is going to kick us off. She's going to go from like the more tactical side. You're a PM, you have a problem, you want to solve it. You might want to do that quickly. And how she thinks about that. And then I'm going to take us to more of like a run state, something that maybe is a little bit more refined, something you'd be interested in scaling across your team. I'm going to show you how that works on Zapier, just like AMC is going to show you how that works on Zapier. But I'm going to try to also make sure that the thinking of how to do that is like relatively universal. I don't want to pigeonhole us too much in one given system. I want to make sure everybody comes away with something that is a valuable nugget. So we'll see a little bit of both sides, the agentic side, more deterministic side, but everything's AI focused and PM focused.
Sweet deal.
AMC.
Awesome. Okay, so um, I have been thinking about a lot about how agents can really help PM specifically. And one of the things that I like to think about is how can we reach for tools off the shelf that we can put into action right away with pretty minimal effort in order to actually be able to take advantage of what they offer us. So I'm going to walk you through a use case that I created live in the moment because I was kind of frustrated with all the work I was having to do. And I was like, all right, this is a little annoying. I'm going to create an agent right now. And the key things that I want to highlight here, per what Austin said, is that this is going to be focused on how I did it in the tool that I built. So there's some of that, but also a lot of the stuff is like universal in how you think about building with AI. So I'm going to share my screen here and just jump into it. Um, so show of hands, I don't know who all here has used the Zapier agent product here, but this is a look at I have a pod here, a demo pod. You can also just see I have a lot of agents. Um, and I have even more. Pods lets you kind of organize and orchestrate a little bit here. So I'm going to walk you through this agent that I created to kind of help spread the load around managing billing escalations. And I'll walk you through exactly how I created it and as well as some of the, just like the thought processes that made me think, oh, like an agent can help here. So the background on this problem was we have a billing process on my team where there is like self-serve billing flow, but then if you want to upgrade to an advanced plan with a custom limit, we have a whole process for managing that manually. And I was running all of that, and I was managing our Slack channel that we process those requests into, and I was just a little overloaded by that. So one day I was talking to the team about it, and I was like, "Hey, can folks help out?" And people were like, "Yeah, sure. Like, just tell us when." And the problem is figuring out how to like spread that load. I was like, "Let me just build a quick on-call rotation here." So this is an agent that I built to kick off every day. Look at 1 a.m. Pacific time to build a a on-call uh, calendar event for whoever should be managing and a Slack message for that user. So the way I did it is I broke it up into steps and I've described in natural language what the agent should be doing. So first, I want the agent to look at the billing rotation calendar event from the most recent weekday and figure out like who was most recently on call. Then look at the list below of the people that are going to be helping manage the on call and pick the next person. Then go check and see if they're in office. If they're not in office, go find the next person on the list. And then once you have someone who is not out of office, to send a Slack message tagging that user, add an event for them to the calendar, and basically kind of like set up that rotation. So I've kind of constructed a fairly complex sequence of logic just through natural language here by thinking about how I want it to work. And this is where I get really excited about like the agentic future, blurring the line between what it means to write software and what it means to use software, and how agents are kind of somewhere in the middle, where like in some ways I've like written some software, but in other ways I'm using pre-existing software. And so it kind of really starts to merge in that murky middle in a way that makes it much more applicable for more people. So I'm going to walk kind of step by step through this, and also answer any questions that people have as you go along. Um, First of all, when it comes to working with anything with AI, it's very useful to talk like breaking things up into like numbers and steps. And one of the number one reasons for that is when we see agents succeed or fail, it's almost always driven by how well the human described what they wanted to do. And so breaking things up into steps is actually a hack for you to make sure you've thought about how you want it to work, and making sure that that's, one consistent thing. We often see agents fail when users have conflicting instructions, because you were like writing something and then you started thinking about something else and you described it another way, or maybe you wrote it and it worked and then you like made a change to one part but forgot to make a change to another. It's extremely common. So just breaking things up by sequences here. So I have my trigger here. I have it scheduled by Zapier. I can replace this with, I could kick off from any of our thousands of apps. By the way, I'm going to try to keep chat open here. So, feel free to ask as you go along.
I'll let you know if anything pops up in chat. I'm watching.
Amazing. Thank you, Austin. So schedule, I think schedule is a good default thing for PMs to reach for. Because if you think about when in your when in your day, when in your week are you like doing certain things, and that you can, kick off on a particular schedule. There's also more kind of proactive things like, when a new row is updated, when a new calendar event is scheduled, across, I think we have something like 25,000 triggers. So in Zapier specifically, but also, other products as well that have trigger-based agents. There's a lot there. Yeah, Austin.
There's a great question from Sean in the chat about your prompt and one thing he noticed in the prompt specifically. We can hold it or we can run it now if you want.
Yeah, totally. Okay. I'll get to that in a second as I go through it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, I want this agent every day to schedule someone to be on call. And so I first started thinking about like, okay, maybe I'll just give it a list of people. And I was like, well, how do I get that agent to know who was on call yesterday? I was like, okay, well, I can use a calendar event and then a lookup calendar to like find the event from yesterday. And so you're thinking about like, how do you manage what your agent knows in any given moment? So having it create content and also look up that content is one way to make sure your agent is thinking about, who was on call yesterday? How do you start the next sequence? So first of all, the first thing I wanted to do is like look at the billing rotation calendar for the most recent workday to determine who was on call. And let me actually just pull up the billing rotation calendar here so I can show y'all really quickly. Boop, 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 boop. Uh, there we go. All right, can y'all see my screen with the billing rotation?
Yes.
So I have the billing rotation calendar here, and so you can see Rafael is on today, Nick was on yesterday, Mihal the other day. Also, you'll notice here that with agents, a natural language based development, I can tell it. I don't have to like think about how to program weekdays. I can just be like, look, you know what time is on Monday. Look at Friday. Don't look at the Sunday. So I just kind of describe that when I say look at the most recent weekday, I don't have to just like actually get into programming that. I could just, describe to it like it was an agent or like it was an intern. So then, look at who should be next and go check their calendar. This is where I start thinking about tool calling here. And I did something pretty interesting here. So I'm having it use my Google Calendar to look at other calendars. And I specifically chose these, I said select of one of these choices. So I gave my agent all of my coworkers' calendars that it should be looking at. And I could, I can subscribe to lots of calendars here, but I've kind of narrowed the choices. Like these are the calendars you should be looking at. And my agent is able to look at Andrew, Corbin, Jonathan, these words here, and know that I'm talking about Andrew dot, Cordopoulos at Zapier or Jonathan dot Harrell. So I don't have to like really tie these things together and be very specific of like Andrew equals this, this calendar. And so I told it to, look at that. If the user is out of office, then go forward. So one thing I found is this worked perfectly the first day that I tested it. The next day, someone actually was out of office, and I realized that it was looking for a search term out of office instead of looking at all the events and then filtering to out of office type events. And so I had a particular member of my team who was out of office, but they didn't title the event out of office. So I had to tell the agent, like, hey, it makes sense. I told you to look for out of office. It makes sense that you might look for a search term out of office, but I don't want you to do that. I want you to just look at everything and check for all day events for an out of office event type. So this is one of those things where what I love about agentic software generally is that it kind of bridges the gap between the developer loop of building something, checking the error codes, and then iterating on it, to building something, looking at what the agent said it did and why, and being like, oh, that makes sense, and that's not actually what I want. So it's kind of moving us towards the developer loop, but in a less developer focused way because you have more of a conversational interface to understand what's going on. So then I was like, once you know who should be on call, tag them. In this case here, I said like send a message in team agents, and it's figuring out who to tag by using the find user by email, just giving it this action. So in all these cases, these are actions that have like a ton of different fields that I could set, but I don't have to because I can just tell my agent generally what I want and it can guess along the way. So this is something where I get really excited personally to use agents because I could do a lot of this stuff in a Zap, but it would require a ton of manual configuration and a ton of pre-thinking and a ton of formatting that I personally find pretty taxing. And I personally don't spend a lot of time doing that. Versus this, I wrote up in about 8 minutes. Like it took me as long as it took to type this. I tested it a couple times and it worked. And then lastly, I asked it to like create an event. And again, this is universal when you're thinking about agentic systems to have it create information as kind of a record for itself to then reflect on the next time it spins up. So it's creating this event so that the next day it'll look back at that event as its kind of memory. So I'm going to pause here for a second and look at a lot of the questions here. Uh, Sean, did I answer your question about the that corner piece around how agents? Okay, awesome. Let's see if there are other questions here. Okay. Seems like we're fairly minimal on questions. Let me give you people another second here. And also you feel free to raise your hand and just like come up and we can do something live. I think I've got maybe another 10 minutes here, so we could actually just build something on the fly if anybody has a question about what they can build.
We could also try. Oh, I am off mute. Okay. Um, Germain, sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Thanks for asking the question. I think talking about like predictability of outputs and if you have any strategies for that when using an agent, that could be helpful. And then I'll also touch on that a little bit more in my section.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and this leads into a lot of what Austin's section is going to be about. I personally find that I reach for agents very frequently for my day-to-day productivity because it's often takes me about as much time to create the agent as it does to do the thing that I was doing like once or maybe twice. So once I have to do that thing 2 or 3 times, maybe I do it once a week, 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm saving myself time. I personally enjoy using agents for things where I see the output of it. So I have it do a lot of stuff in Slack for me. I have it manage auto replying to people in our feedback channel. I have it sending people forms to fill out, stuff like that. And those are things where the value to me is quite high, and the criticality, if it doesn't quite hit, is not incredibly terrible. And I was giving an example, like I made a change and my agent started or stopped threading replies. And so I had to go back and change something so it would thread replies appropriately. Is it the end of the world that it stopped threading and started sending messages to a channel? Not necessarily. Fixed it quickly. That's fine. And also, it's something where I can see that that's what's happening. So those are all kind of ways that I like to consider when I'm going to pull an agent for something versus when I want to use a more deterministic system. And the reality is there's a huge spectrum between agents and like binary code that you write on a computer. And so like binary code, like they're extremely verifiable. And then you start getting into like less and less I don't want to even talk about determinism and inference, but basically the more you can meet the machine at the machine language level, the more guarantees you have of the machine operating the way you intend it to. But also the more you have to change your brain to meet the machine where it's at. And like not many people write in binary. Mostly we're using programming languages like, TypeScript or Python in a lot of cases. People have opinions there. Um, but so I think about agents as kind of opening up the aperture to more and more people being able to like use natural language, and then to do the programming, if you will. And then you also want to be thinking about like what are the determinism, non-determinism trade-offs there. Like if you're leaning all the way into agents being a non-deterministic runner, um, the times where you're going to get less predictable outcomes, are there places where you want to move that into a more predictable system? And Austin will kick off some of that and how you think about mixing and matching determinism and non-determinism. Have I noticed a change in conversion rate in the desired actions when using agents versus doing it? Ian, can you share that, speak a little bit more to that question? I'm not 100% sure what you're asking there.
Yeah, so you were talking about how at the moment you're using it to automate responses from feedback, getting people to fill out forms. So I'm just curious, is when you set it on an automated schedule, are people less likely to actually do the action that you're looking for them to do versus if you were to do it yourself in the old way?
Yeah, totally. I think one thing that I have found is that people are a little bit more receptive to a robot asking them to follow standard processes. It's a little bit more awkward to be like, hey, we have a form to fill out for this. Do you mind filling it out? Like that's there's like emotional friction there versus it's much easier to be like, oh, you know what? Our process is asking you to do that. I'm not asking you to do that, even though I set up the process. So I actually find that we get much better, I will call it compliance. And we have a lot of people at Zapier are using agents to do this of just kind of like encouraging compliance with processes that they want people to follow because it's a much lower emotional friction thing to do to have an agent say, hey, can you fill out this form? Um, and then I think Michael, we're definitely going to get into that with Austin's section here. Katie has a question. If I give it a competitor product and update websites, have provide a summary of what new features have come out with links. Totally. Yeah. So we could do this really quickly. I'll just do it really. So um, every Wednesday morning hold on, let me grab this and I will just create an agent. Okay, every Wednesday morning, let me move my chat so I can see all this. Um, you have a list of competitor product update websites and have it provide a summary of what features have come out with links. Love to have it scheduled, blah, 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 blah. Cool, great. So I'm going to create agent and go through this whole creation flow here and we'll do this live. So what this is doing is kind of like a prompt assistance. It's going to try to generate a recommended prompt. So schedule Wednesday, get a list of competitors for each URL on the list, visit the website, analyze the content, identify new features, compile a list of all features, send an email containing a summary to specified recipient. Great, that sounds great. So I'm going to add my trigger, schedule by Zapier every week on Wednesday. And then I think, sure, 2 a.m. Why not? Who's got a couple competitor websites they want to look at? I don't know, Katie, if you want to drop a couple websites in here.
Yeah, I can do that. Hold on 1 second.
I'd love to do a competitive analysis on Harvey AI.
On which one? Harvey?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Harvey AI. Thank you.
Nice. Okay. And do you have a website? Let's just pull Harvey.ai, right? Let's not use our UTM parameters. And then let's grab a couple others here. Anyone has another website they want to drop in here? Did you? Okay, well, that's coming. I'm gonna also have it send an email containing the summary, the report to specific recipient. So here I'm gonna go add a tool. I don't have to add a tool for the web browsing, that's a default tool. I'm gonna add a tool for Gmail, and I'm gonna go ahead and have it send email. A lot of times I'll choose create draft, because it's nice to have that moment for an end user to look at that. But in this case, I'm gonna have it send to me and only me, so it's fine to have it send the email. So this is something that, like, by default, in the Zapier tool, when you add a tool, by default, all the parameters are going to be guessed by your agent, but you can lock the parameters down and say, like, nope, I only want you to be able to send this email to me. And so a lot of times I think about, and this is good general advice with AI, I think about either locking things down or choosing draft modes. And so that's kind of two different ways that you can get more human control there. Okay, and we've got Flora here. That's another competitor. Just want to use a couple
I
here.
put like a couple of links in the Zoom chat that are like the product websites, like the help doc links.
Nice. Okay, so let's do those then. And sorry, I'm using a tiny screen today because I'm traveling and I don't have my monitor, so I have to keep moving everything around. Okay, so we'll look at these two websites. Visit the website. And I'm actually going to drop this get the predefined list because I'm actually defining that here. So now all my numbers are off, but that's fine. I don't think the agent will mind that.
Another thing I was thinking from my experience with ChatGPT is like, say, over the past 7 days, so it knows the time frame in which to analyze sites.
Yeah, analyze if content. Okay, and then are these sites specific for updates within a week? Oh, I see. And you have release notes for the particular. So you want it to go to this like most recent release notes, right?
Yeah, I could do that too, because obviously the link is different every week within it.
Totally. Okay. And then do you want to also, let's see, is there anything else you want it to do besides you want it to look at the what's new as well as the release notes, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So in that case, so we have two different tools, one for visiting a website and one for doing a search. So I think I'm going to say, get the links for any new updates in the past 7 days and go to those URLs. We currently don't support like clicking around on a website, but if it gets the link and then goes to visit those URLs as a second step, that can work. So then let's do this. And let's make this 1 and then 2. Okay. And then I want you to send an email. That feels good. Okay, so let's test this. I love doing these things live, by the way. It's always so fun. Thank you, Katie, for suggesting that. Okay. So it went to this first website. Look for new features released in the past week. I do think I'll need to look at how it handles looking for the links and then navigating to those links. So I suspect that I might need to do a little bit more work with this bit of instructions. We are also looking at enabling the agent to just click around and load links there. So that is another thing there. So while this is loading here and looking at that content, let me look at the rest of my agent instructions. Oh no. Website is having technical issues. Interesting. Let's see. This is one thing that I do like about agents is that if something does fail, it will try again. And especially with tool calls, this is really helpful because it can look at what the error message is and reformat the tool call based on that error message. Such as instead of email, send to my Slack. Yeah, Jermaine, so your question here is, would it be possible to refine the trigger instructions based on the comments? Can you tell me?
I think the question we refined down to was like that prompt assist kind of guidance that you got when you first created the agent. Is there a way to re-invoke some sort of prompt assist to not have to just start from what you've got and then continue building with your own natural language, but instead to kind of zoom out and get more prompt assist?
Yeah, that's a great question. We did just add the prompt assist functionality, so we'll be iterating on that. Okay, so it looks like the full story website might be being blocked by web browsing. Like sometimes sites can block robot web browsers. So I do see that the Zendesk one is working here and it's preparing an email. Let me just load that up here. One thing I also want to highlight here is in the test flow, we think a lot about what are safe actions and what are less safe actions. So if you see here, this is the proof button. Anytime the action is going to write data somewhere else, like send a message, send email, et cetera, we have an approve step where you can see a preview in the test flow. So I can see that it's going to go to me. It's going to say, here's your weekly summary, Zendesk updates, release notes through 5/23, chat and messaging, conversations, AI agents and knowledge, Copilot, app marketplace. So I might say like, actually, I want this to be a little bit more concise, or, and then I can update my instructions to say, hey, like, include no more than 5 updates, or just provide an executive summary, or, I can kind of look at how this works and tweak it as it goes. But you can imagine all of us actually probably probably want something like this that is looking at 5 to 6 key competitors and manage like looking at their like what's new, and sending themselves emails every week. So this is, I can pull this up here. I do think that there are, when it comes to navigating around the web, there are always considerations around which websites have blocked the abilities of different like navigating to those webs, so that you can run into issues there that are outside the control of Zapier, for instance. But I would definitely encourage you to play around with this and build your competitors. I can also create a template here that you guys can all copy. Well, actually, maybe I should remove my email from this. Austin, you have a question?
Two things. One, a comment on this flow, and one thing that I would guess Katie is like implying in the frustrations with this not working as well as it maybe has in the past while using ChatGPT for stuff like this, is ChatGPT doesn't have any memory about the last time you asked that question. And so it probably gets you like redundant stuff that is already there. And it's like, here's the new thing. And that's a very common
Oh,
pattern.
I managed that by actually putting the explicit date range every
Okay,
week. What's
there you
been
go.
interesting though is it's the exact same prompt every single week. I have a calendar reminder to myself, to
Yeah,
send it. And it was excellent the first time. And I do it every Wednesday morning, and it's gotten worse and worse. Like
Oh,
I go to the actual sites and there's stuff that came the past week and it doesn't catch it. So I don't know if something's going on with their model because I haven't changed my prompt. It was just sort of interesting, but the automation piece is what that felt like you could do here so that I don't have to go in and source it, myself.
yeah, I personally find that most of the things that I'm building agents for are triggered on a schedule or triggered on a Slack message, because there's stuff that I like to do on a particular cadence,
Yeah.
and also stuff that I like to do like when a particular message comes in. Like look at that message. I also have I'm not really great with email, so I have an agent that's just constantly monitoring my email and sends me Slack messages when things look urgent.
same.
Because I'm just like, I can't be bothered to open another email tab, apparently.
Yeah.
But I think so many of us are doing that. We're all flooded with content and flooded with information. And so using agents to take a first pass at like sending stuff to you a little bit more quickly when you need it, or take a first pass at responding to someone. We have a lot of folks internally that are using agents with an attached knowledge source. So we have like, kind of a RAG system here. I can add a data source from, there's a lot of different tools that support it. But for instance, if I have a Google Doc with a knowledge source for my like FAQ, I can attach that to an agent, and then I can have my agent just take a first stab at responding to questions that are coming to my team Slack. Just be like, hey, I noticed that you were asking about when this thing is going to be built, and we have it on our Q3 roadmap. Here's like, so like various things like that of just taking a first stab at stuff, especially in an internal context where it's okay if the agent gets it wrong, especially from a like the FAQ side of things. We have tons of customers that are using agents for straight up customer support of just like reply to this commonly asked question via email or things like that. You tell the Python script, I think it would do and schedule that to run as a Python script. Doesn't, oh yeah, super interesting, Sean. Totally. And that's one thing that we're also kind of listening for is if customers want to start adding more custom tools in. We've been targeting building the our agent product specifically is targeted towards the like less well, I guess you could also write it as a custom action. But the kind of really out of the box. We're focused on users who are looking for things that work out of the box. But as we expand that, we might also go in that direction, Sean. But Katie, I think this is a great thing. One thing you might consider, I don't know why ChatGPT has stopped working. Potentially they're caching your prompts. But also to Austin's point on memory, I often have things where like I might have a step here of like add to a table, and then
Yeah.
I'll like add a tool here and I'll say like create a record. And so like add that to a table, and then I might have another agent that every like few weeks looks at this table and sends me like an executive summary of like what's going on in the ecosystem or something like that. And so people are trying to build systems on systems that help you stay aware and on top of things that take like, I mean, again, like 5 minutes to create these systems. And when you add that again, once again, when you add something here, you can just say it can figure out which table it should add, or you could say I want to set a specific table here. And then with table actions specifically, see like sure, I have a demo people to message. You can see here that once you pick the table, then you'll have columns like the name, the email, status, blah blah blah, and I can say like don't include this field, like never include this field, or like set a specific, this is like from agent. So it'll always have from agent as the data there, or I can have my agent generate data. So you can kind of control how much you want to lock down what your agent does, or you can leave it up to your agent to figure that out. And then as I hand it over to Austin to take some things on here. Oh, actually, I just created this as a template and didn't send y'all the link. The one thing I want to highlight here is that the agent product at Zapier specifically is a non-deterministic engine. So this is how we're able to make the whole thing just natural language, is that when this agent is like kicked off at Wednesday at 2 a.m., it will load all of these instructions into its agent loop, and it will decide which of its available tools it will take action on and how it will take that action. So every single bit of this system runs non-deterministically, which is extremely easy to set up. But as you find things that you want to run a little bit more deterministically, or you want to mix and match determinism with non-determinism, that's when you want to start thinking about Zaps and agents together. And Austin's going to show you a bunch of systems that he's built that mix and match between the two. I will also be in chat responding to questions, so feel free to continue dropping questions related to this. So I'll hand it over to Austin. Thank you.
Sweet, thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, I have competitive research stuff running like that, and I'm definitely using Zapier tables to like log everything and then inform in the context window, be like, you can ignore these recent things that you've already researched. If you see these, don't add these to the log. This is no longer new information for me. So I lean heavily on using some sort of logging, which I use Zapier tables for to help keep that memory up. Okay, so turning to the more like run state, more deterministic parts of AI. And AMC, if you don't mind letting me know if anything pops up in the chat, otherwise I'll assume that you're canvassing that. So since we're recording, since this is for a larger audience, I ended up doing this mostly in still images with redactions because these are all real things that we're using, and I needed to be careful there. But if anybody has questions, we can always pop the hood on a couple things in a limited capacity to show you that. So this is a graphic that often comes up in the automation world. It's not relevant to AI. Has anybody seen this one before? Couple nods. So this is like a matrix of how much time you'll save by automating something against how often you do the task. And then in the grid is how much time you can spend as a maximum to get a return on your time. And so this is like a joke graphic from XKCD, but it's also actually like a really funny, powerful tool to think like, if I spend like a day on this, is it actually even worth me automating this thing? And when you're thinking about teams and systems that can roll out across entire teams that use AI, you often immediately start seeing value, because if I do this thing daily and it saves me 5 minutes, multiply that by the number of team members you have. And that's the amount of time you could possibly spend on something while still getting your return over that time horizon. So it's just a funny thing to kind of cross-reference, but then it does show you that if you can scale an automation that has AI in it across your team, you get a lot of value back. A tool I'll be coming back to throughout this is automation spectrum. So it doesn't have the word agents here. That's on purpose to make sure people are thinking without like the specific words that we tend to get hung up on in the current kind of thinking. But when you think about Zapier agents, like what AMC just demoed, that's on the far right of this. That's making intelligence actionable. It's giving like directions to something that can change its behavior. It can retry things. It can be guided on what to do without being programmed on what to do. And then on the far left, you have a traditional automation, which would be like a Zap with no AI in it. And then somewhere in the middle, there are different versions of integrating AI into what you're doing that allow for more or less configuration or more or less adaptability or deterministic behavior within what you're building. Something that we didn't get to in the agent section is that you can also call agents from Zaps. So you can build hybrid architectures of automations with this stuff, which is really powerful. So the first example of something we're doing internally is consolidating product feedback from across a bunch of different places. So you can see that like had all this breakdown of all this information. We use a system like Product Board to be able to show where all that stuff lives and tie that stuff back to the actual source. But the problem that I would imagine people who are dealing with lots of different customers face is you have so many different sources for feedback, call recordings, sales people just throwing things in Slack messages saying, hey, I have this feedback from my customer, NPS surveys that might be going out, or other kind of programmatic surveys that go out. Customer support tickets are an absolute gold mine for product feedback, obviously. And then another huge problem is a lot of this needs to be logged manually. So you have to rely on people to actually do this processing of the feedback. And if you do get to the level where you have a tool that maybe is helping with some of that AI processing of feedback, it's typically quite generic. The AI system that's doing that evaluation or classification or whatnot is not usually able to deeply understand your customer, your product, the way you see the feedback. And it's definitely not tailored to the insights that you want. It's tailored to some median or average of what insights should be pulled out across the way. So in the system that we built, what are we doing? We're gathering feedback from known systems. We're using AI to classify data. We're using AI to analyze that data in context, and we're logging it somewhere in a destination system. Where can we optimize? I'll save my breath on this one for time and just talk about one thing in this example where we can optimize for exactly what's coming in, which is completeness. Making sure that you actually have this hooked up to all those different systems. So are you getting feedback from your ticketing system, Zendesk, for example? Are you getting feedback from your calls, whether that's Zoom recordings, Gong, Chorus, whatever it is? And so making sure that that's like not just hooked up to that source, but are you calling the right parts of that source to get all of the information relevant? So if you're calling into Zendesk, are you getting just the ticket as it was submitted? Or are you getting the entire conversation that followed onto the ticket, including internal comments and things like that? And then there's a trap listed at the bottom. If people have questions, I can come back to this slide. I can also make these available afterwards. So it's full system. It's much more on the deterministic side, and it kind of has 4 different phases. There's the triggering phase. So that's all the different places we need to set up triggers. So what kicks off the process of ingesting feedback, using AI to analyzing it and all that stuff. Then we have the processors. These are the workhorses within the system. These are the things that are actually using AI to do the classification, do the analysis, all that stuff. Then we have the storage. So this is final stages of enrichment, making sure it's hooked up to the right parts and associated records in the CRM as an example, and then piping those into whatever your storage system is. Now, if you're a smaller company, that might just be a Google Sheet or a Zapier table. But if you have a system like Product Board, that end state would be something like Product Board or whatever the equivalent is. And this system even has some administrative features that you can build on the back of it. You can scale this out to be as complex and be like in this run state as you want, or you can walk this back to be much, much more fine tuned to a narrow scope. And I would suggest typically starting with a narrower scope at first, but I do want to show the full power of where this happens. So you can do manual ingestion through the Zapier Chrome extension and add feedback that way ad hoc from anywhere in your browser. You can have a form set up, whether that's a third-party form system or Zapier interfaces. It's agnostic. Either of those get pulled in. If there's feedback in Slack, you can add a React G to it, which is just adding an emoji to one of the messages, and you can have it piped up to then consume that Slack thread and analyze for feedback there. Anything in your CRM, whether that's Salesforce, HubSpot, Zoho, and then survey responses, including Wootrick or anything else. And then I said call recordings already. So that's everything on the left in that green box. The whole job of that part of the system is to just connect to all those sources where feedback lives and happens naturally and pull them in to your automation platform. In this case, that's Zapier. And then the processing section takes the well-formed feedback from things like forms or other things and drops it into an extraction process. So in Slack, somebody's writing explicitly, this person had this feedback. On a Gong call or on a transcript from a Zoom call, you have to find the feedback in that entire unstructured data, that giant transcript, which oftentimes could be like 60 minutes of raw transcript. So you can build out your prompts and things in there to look for feedback. And by giving the AI analysis that you're doing for that extraction, you can make sure that that feedback is not super generic to the median of what feedback might sound like, but is instead hyper specific to what your business does, what your group is interested in learning. Then you have a normalization layer. This is where you do some summarization, classification of the feedback source, the themes, all of those different things. Again, this is another workhorse part of the system. So extracting from unstructured data sources, and then everything joins back up at a normalization layer. And that's where the AI actually takes a lot of the punch. Any questions on the first two sections there? Or kind of the idea of having this split out into an ingestion or like intake part, and then a sub-processing kind of part? No questions yet. So then we have the storing area. So this is where we log it somewhere, an intermediate step, or you could drop it directly into your end system. We like to do CRM enrichment so that we can account for exactly who the person was rather than just having it associated to like a text field name or something. Product Board is the system we use, so we're allowed to map that directly to the HubSpot record, which is our CRM, so that we can tie value of ARR to different insights that are coming back from this process and all of that stuff. And at the end state, it dumps into Product Board, not just with the feedback that's been analyzed with AI and extracted by AI in the cases where the extraction is necessary, but it's also enriched through our CRM so that we have it all tied back to the exact customer that left that feedback. On the far right, there are some administrative things. You can have a chatbot hooked up to look at this data, and then you could ask weekly, like, hey, what are my themes for feedback around this topic? So that just shows you can kind of set up some things on the back end of this that help you maybe instead of looking directly in Product Board. I don't know if there's many Product Board users out there, but sometimes it's a little hard to find insights across different places and gather those things and kind of get a feel for what's going on in a given week or month. And so you can set it up to have a chatbot looking at this intermediary step, which I have in this process. So that's kind of what that whole thing looks like. And now taking it back to the spectrum. So this is the product feedback process we talked about. Here's a few of the jobs that are happening within that process and where they sit on the spectrum. And if you wanted to expand them to other things, where that would sit on the spectrum. So contact CRM enrichment, firmly within traditional automation, but it's a key part of this system. Searching internally for similar feedback. So if you want to see patterns before you log something or associate different insights together during this process, that's an AI workload that can happen in your automation provider. And then the classifying, analyzing, all that stuff. Again, you're just dropping in nodes of AI where you have a lot of control over what data AI has access to and the prompt and the job that it's actually executing. It can only do that one thing. So it's very deterministic in nature. in terms of what its control plane is and how many other actions it can take. And much like Katie brought up earlier, if we wanted to expand this use case, we could also have it spit out researching competitive offerings with an agent after we run all this, right? And then we could even log the competitive research back to be associated with that product board insight or the feature that it got associated with. So um, that's one thing that I have set up in my intake channel for when people have product feedback is anytime product feedback comes in, an agent immediately goes and does competitive research against a list, kind of like you said, Katie. And then it provides a quick message that says, hey, we've run analysis on this feature, and this feature that we extracted from the Slack message. And you can find that research here. And it links out to both the table and a Google Doc summary of the research that was provided. So that's, many ways that you can kind of hook all of this up together. Does anybody feel like they have a really good consolidated product feedback ingestion system already that would have something like this or a node that they want to share that might kind of make it more real to how you're doing this today?
I'll go. So at my company, we've actually built something like this, but I think it's powered by Glean AI search right now.
Yeah.
Do you guys see them maybe as a competitor in that sense or no?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. AMC, you go for it. I saw you come on mute.
Yeah, totally. Katie, what's the use case with Glean here?
So no, I think Glean is just that's the collector of the data throughout and brings all these systems together. And then our engineering team built like a bot basically on top of it, and it's now in Slack. So if you like mention that bot and you give it a prompt, it would do something like this that would bring all of the customer feedback together. And then so that's something we've been attempting to do something very similar. I was going to say we're heavy product board users, and we tried to pull in ARR information because it connects to Salesforce, so you can see it. But the API for product board doesn't allow you to get the ARR data. So it seems like you guys kind of figured out a workaround to like connect to your CRM.
Yeah, I would say that the key highlight here is so Zapier was established a decade ago to solve the problem of getting information to and from different products, right? And that problem has existed for as long as we've had different products. I think in the world of AI, it's more useful to get data moving to and from different products because you can have a reasoning system make sense of information at the aggregate or in between or all these other things. And so instead of being bottlenecked on a human being like, I'm going to look at information in product board and I'm going to like go put it over in Salesforce with relevant context. Instead of being bottlenecked on a human offering insight on top of that, AI can offer insight, which makes it more interesting and more useful to start thinking about data moving between tools and aggregating in different places, et cetera. So the Zapier product is integrations across 8,000 apps with, I think, 35,000 actions, 25,000 triggers and 35,000 actions across 8,000 different apps. So when you ask about competition, it's interesting because you can always, as a developer, go build against APIs to make custom information move from one place to another. The Zapier product exists to let non-developers do that. And with the Zapier product plus all of the AI integrations, like all the ChatGPT integrations, or even running your Zapier agents on AI, that allows you as a non-developer to move information from place to place and create these like systems where you can ask questions of it and things like that. So I would say that at the end, a lot of these things will allow you to do the same things. It's just a matter of whether you need a developer to set it up, whether the developer is building on top of APIs or whether it's building on top of other products or whether it's an end user that's building a system for themselves to use.
Yeah, like I think it was Glean AI and then Cursor and then the bot. So it wasn't as like I couldn't do it myself as a PM, or I just don't have the skills to be able to do that right now. Yeah.
Totally. And so we think about enabling it like literally everyone can take advantage of these tools. Some of the biggest challenges is building the interfaces and the integration. And since Zapier is an integration product, how can we make it easier for you to like abstract away that integration piece and just be like, look, I just want data from here to talk to data from here. And so the agent tool is trying to make that like the absolute floor of easy, where you don't even have to think about which parameters from which tool map to which other parameters from the other tool, and like how you think about which fields line up to which other fields. You can just tell your agent like make sense of it. But then as you play with things and as you explore, you can find the edges where you're like, no, I know every time I want this bit of data to go right here. And so you can like carve little bits off into more control and more determinism. Um, but the and I know Sunny, you've got your hand up here, but I think what's interesting from a PM perspective is like on one hand, there's all the vibe coding tools and we can all become developers. And on the other hand, we don't even have to become developers. There's all sorts of things we can do without becoming developers if we just start thinking from a mindset of, I bet AI can solve this problem for me. Sunny, you got your hand up.
Yeah, something maybe a problem that I definitely constantly have with some of the tools that are, Zapier-esque, right? And you can name who your competitors are, is there are some places where it doesn't have an API, like a tool that's like a custom dashboard that's used that's like super obscure, but you need to do it but you need to grab information from this obscure dashboard. There's no like easy API for it, but you need it to give updates to your monthly update, to your quarterly update, things like that. Any kind of like thoughts around that of how to solve that with Zapier or maybe in the future?
Yeah, so there's a few answers to that. So the answer right now is we have custom actions. So you can create a Zapier action for any Zapier integration. So basically, when you think about integrating with between two products, there's usually two key pieces. The first piece is authentication. How do you authenticate like into that product? And the second piece is the actual API of like what you were able to do once you've authenticated. And so Zapier, like all of our Zapier actions and triggers are both. It's both the authentication piece, like you can, OAuth into your Slack account, into your Google account, into your, whatever. So it's also the authentication plus it is the interface with that company's API. Zapier also has a product called Custom Actions where you can just use the authentication piece and you can build the API integration piece on your own. So I think that's one set of answers. And you can use a lot of like code generating products to help you like generate the code for that interface. I do think the taking advantage of the fact that you don't have to build auth is actually a huge advantage because I don't know if anyone here has been a developer before, but like auth is one of the most obnoxious things. The other side is if you think about like, I'm kind of interested in where like browser-based automation is going to go to kind of like fill that last mile problem of like missing APIs. Um, it's interesting. I haven't really seen anything incredibly convincing there yet. I think everyone's excited about where that might go, and I think there are products out there that are claiming to be really good on top of browser automation today, and I haven't seen them to actually hold water. But that is interesting. Did that answer your question, Sunny?
Yeah, I mean, so like to close the loop for things where the public, like there isn't an API for you to hit, it's an unsolved problem right now, like across the board.
So, I think the first of all, if there is absolutely no API, even an undocumented one, yes, it's an unsolved problem. I think there are often APIs that exist that aren't
Documented, but then you like know,
right. Either they aren't documented or they're documented, but there's no integration with that API that you have
yeah,
direct access to. So you can always write something to integrate with a documented API, and you can often write something to integrate with an undocumented API. Like that's possible. I think if there is no API exposed whatsoever, then you have to start talking about like how do we let agents operate at the human interface layer, which is basically browser automation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the future there.
cool.
TBD.
I would even add one other fun layer of the API kind of domain. It's like documented API that does what you want, documented APIs that don't do what you want, but you might be able to get enough data out of it to do like lots of data transformations on it so that it almost feels undocumented, the use case that you're using it for. Product Board is a good example of that. They don't allow you to search across the Product Board API surface for what's called products in their UI, but you can search for, or you can't search for product by um, like product manager owner of a certain feature. But if you kind of chain a few things together and run a bunch of filters on top of it, you can still get the value out of that. And then undocumented APIs are invisible except in the network and console typically. And then you go to like full browser use. So it's a spectrum. Mike.
Yeah, I spent the last 2 months going pretty deep on like browser agents. The use case that I have, similar to what you were describing, Sunny, no APIs available, like proprietary systems within like the world of clinical research, are not something that would pop up like
Mhm.
in a Zapier type library. And what I've gotten into a good workflow is what I'll do is I use Python Playwright, or you could do it in JavaScript as well. And what you can do is install a browser extension, a Playwright browser extension, and you go and you actually take the action in the system as a user, and it records all of your clicks as code in a deterministic way. And then I will copy that back into my repo, and that's the, create this record action or fetch this data action. And I'm going to drop this in the chat. What I'm starting to play around with is, and this library is coming from the browser-based team, its intent is to give you the best of both worlds, where you can have that like deterministic, like I have the code, but also I want to intermix some AI, go figure this out because I haven't figured it out yet. And so I think one of like my personal aspirations is like I get access to a new system because there's a lot of these systems, and it's like, hey, go do a like more of that LLM, like just go explore this tool and like figure out all the things that the system can do and like record those actions. And then I want to record those actions and like lock them into a more deterministic thing in my code base. So, because I think where the browser agents fail is like if you don't give them direction, they can get stuck, they can get lost, they can kind of go off the rails. And so my goal with my clients is to give them a very like, no, it will only ever do this, but it takes a while to go and get that code. And so I'm trying to automate that process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really actually really want to second that. I was actually messaging someone else on the side. Really recommend browser-based and stagehand. I work in a space where nobody has APIs on their tools, legacy systems, and browser-based and stagehand have gotten so good over the last like month and a half too. The combination of those, and then you add a little bit of playwright, and if you make it work, it is really powerful. And then like this other approach, I don't know if I would fully recommend this, but with browser based, you can actually monitor your network and see what API calls are going out and reverse engineer an API. So I don't know if you'd want to do that, but I would highly recommend stagehand and browser based, especially if it's like you're not doing super important workflows. I think it'll get you like 90% of the way there. And it's gotten better over the last 2 months. When we started using it, it was really finicky, but now it's a lot better in our experience.
And I know they started with the JavaScript, I think, is like the current repo, but they're launching a Python one shortly. So
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks
it's a
for sharing it all.
very interesting time for all that because it's like a foundation of sand until people agree that they're okay with you doing that, right? Because they can just add these like blocks that they don't want, or they could hot swap their private APIs. But I love this space. It's going to be so exciting to see how that all plays out.
the one gotcha that has come up for me is like two-factor auth and like text messaging or CAPTCHAs.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
Yeah.
it can't do that. So I literally like sit there, I kick off a command line process, and then I just do CAPTCHAs a million times, and it like does the stuff, and I can watch it on my local or with browser based, I can do it
Yeah.
in the cloud. But like I would love when that gets solved.
Yeah, it also will let you hand control back to a user.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what we've
Yeah.
done is like we've built it to the point where it does the work and then it has the user verify and click submit. So but agreed. There's a long way to go here, and it's not fully production ready. I put it halfway between UAT and production at this point. It's not fully there.
I feel like the tech is there. It's more the like protocols accepting the tech that are most important to refine right now because when capture like you can build on top of captchas and I've seen browsers do captchas, but like One is that are we allowed to do that? Which is a major question out the gate. But then also like the protocols just need to have like ways that agents or browser-based things can access those places securely, safely with their blessing so that those things just come down a level and the guarantees or the signatures or the logins are done in a traceable way rather than human imitation ways.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the anti-spam races where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, like you're like, oh, it's gonna get there because you're gonna add like management for captchas, but like if on the other side that website doesn't want you to, they're gonna add a new thing that makes it hard. And so
Yeah.
I think it's a cultural problem right now as much as a technological one.
Yeah.
And that one too. So like I have to get a client to give me a login to their system.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so that has a lot of like, whoa, what is your agent doing? And so the way I try to work that through is like, hopefully in the system they can control those permissions. They'll name it like, agents at our domain.com. And then I maintain an audit trail on my end of all the things that I do. And then the system should maintain an audit trail. And then
Yeah.
I make it very clear, like it's deterministic. It can only do these 6 things.
Yeah.
I do think there's like a little bit of the like, okay, I trust you, but I don't know if that works at scale with customers. It just works with some of these early adopters.
Yeah.
That's so cool, Mike.
Cool.
Very cool.
Well, thank you all for your input. Thank you, Austin and Anna, for doing the live demos and sharing with everyone. Any kind of like last thoughts or last things that you want to share before we close? I know we're already a little bit over.
I think what Austin said of starting small and add on top of that, I think is the right way to go. I would encourage folks to start like when you run into something that's annoying, just like build an instinctual habit loop in your mind of asking, do I think AI could do this? And like, what is the smallest version of this that I could hand off to AI? And start getting into the loop of practicing that. Because I think that's really critical for PMs in our careers to be thinking about how we work well with AI. And there's a lot of stuff you can grab off the shelf to make things really easy. There's some chat here about some tools that do custom things. I think there's a lot in the agent space that's easy to pick up for small pieces here and there where you can get value back right away.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for your time. Thanks everyone for joining. I'll be sharing the recording in the Slack, and then both Austin and Anna are in the Lenny Slack, so feel free to message them as well. Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Have a great day.
Thanks for organizing, Sunny. Bye.
Absolutely. Bye.